Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Zach Golden. He's the Director of Client Management over at Anova Consulting Group, and we're going to talk about win-loss analysis. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Colin. Really excited to be here.
Me too, man. I'm curious, win-loss analysis is not something that I think most salespeople have probably gone through unless you've worked in a fairly large sales organization. So how did you, and I've noticed that you've been doing this for 10 years now. How did you get into win-loss analysis in the first place?
Yeah, funny you bring that up. Like this month is actually my 10-year anniversary. So yeah, I've been, for the past decade, have had the privilege of helping companies of all shapes and sizes really try to learn how to win and retain more of their customers by using win-loss. And what I've found is that win-loss is just a super powerful tool. And why I've stuck with it for so long is that it really answers the most quintessential business questions, really the most fundamental things like, how do I grow my company? How do I win more? What do customers think about me? What is my competitor doing and how can I beat them out? And those questions are pretty relatively simple, but the answers to them are just extremely nuanced and very intrinsic. And I find sleuthing through to find the answers and to coach the clients I'm working with on what the answers to those questions are fascinating. So it's been fun to kind of build my career around it.
That's really interesting. It's one of those things that I think is less common in the sales world.
Mm-hmm.
I totally get the value. It sounds like it's a ton of work. So if I'm a listener, founder, sales leader, salesperson, why should I think about going through all of this work to go and try and hit up people that have already told me no and figure out why they said no?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about raising your game and winning more business. There are like third-party studies, like Gartner has said that a win-loss program can help a sales team increase their revenue, sometimes up to 50%. But to your point, not a lot of companies do it. Do you have any guess like how many sales teams or companies out there actually do win-loss?
Oh, I'm thinking single digit percentages. I'm gonna say my first reaction was 5%.
Yeah, I
Standard
think
deviation of 4.
yeah, it's definitely in the low single digits. Like whenever we talk with companies who are interested in putting something in place and we ask, what are you doing currently? It is just very rare for someone to say, oh, we've got, a partner who we work with who's doing interviews on our behalf. And we've got a really strong program in place. The tricky thing about win-loss is that you can define it a lot of different ways. Like some companies will just be looking at, if they're using a CRM, what their reason codes are, and maybe they're doing some data mining around what their loss reasons are by product or region, if they're getting that granular. But all that data is like so it's just very flawed. What we think about in terms of win-loss is it's more of like a forensic exercise to kind of really get into the exact detail of what buyers think about your product offering and how you're going to market and ultimately how they're making their decisions. And the only way to do that is through really in-depth interviews. And yeah, not a lot of companies kind of commit to the process and the rigor of doing those debriefs. So hopefully we get into today, like, what are some kind of best practices or things that companies can think about if they want to unlock the power of the feedback.
Totally. Yeah. And I definitely want to get into the how. I feel like I want to park on the why for a little bit longer. I'm one of those people that when you say Gartner study, I just tune out. I'm like, oh, somebody paid $100,000 for that study to happen, and it
Yeah.
wasn't Gartner.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe share like I don't know, an anonymized result from a customer that you've worked with. Like if you can give me a specific number of like, hey, we worked with this company and it we did X and Y and it produced that. And again, to the audience, I'm not trying to turn this into like a Zach Golden add. I just want to show and hear about the value in terms of like real tangible impact you've had for a customer.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the value, it's actually a lot of like intangible things. You're obviously going to receive the feedback that's tied into your business. So if you're, struggling with a sales element, like differentiating or giving a strong product demo that's tied into your prospect's needs, like you'll get the feedback there that is kind of going to help you raise your game and improve in your next sales pitch. Absolutely. It's pretty easy to see that connection. When you start to look at when you do multiple interviews and you're starting to build out trends, you get a really stronger sense of what is actually driving your wins and your losses and how you're ultimately going to win more. Like I think of some of the clients that I've worked with recently who the deepest learnings for their business have come from things that seemingly are they should already know it, right? Like the concept of being customer centric. Every company out there knows you need to focus on your customers and do whatever it is to make them happy. But when it comes down to it, it's really hard to do that consistently and at a high level. And so sometimes we're able to come in with data that shows, although you may say that being customer focused is one of your key tenets, you might not be executing at that level. Like the client I'm thinking of specifically, in our win-loss interviews with their buyers, we're asking respondents to the interviews to be rating their satisfaction with how our client did across a number of different areas. So we might be asking about sales performance, things like their sales team's product knowledge, their ability to give a product demo, their RFP response, how well they understood the customer's needs, how well they tailored the pitch to those needs. And after we did a bunch of interviews, one of the things we did was we just looked at satisfaction that the prospects had for all those different attributes. And there was super high, over 90% satisfaction, even amongst losses for those things that were all about themselves being our client, right? They had a really strong product and they could talk about it really well, whether that was through RFP or their product demo, over 90% satisfaction there. But when it came to customer-centric attributes, understanding their needs, tailoring the pitch to meet their needs, even like the expected value the product would produce for their company, that was all like less than 20% satisfaction there. And when we kind of just stack ranked all these satisfaction things for the leadership team of this company, and it was so powerful to see, you know what, we're actually not customer centric. We're really good about talking about ourselves, but we need to do a better job of focusing on the person that we're selling to. So, I would love to be able to say we were able to tie that finding into them increasing their win rate X% or number of dollars. The reality is that win rates, increased revenue, there's a lot that goes into those things. Like I'm not sure how Gartner calculated that. We certainly use the stat because it makes us look good. But What I found is that companies just kind of intrinsically get, okay, this is really impactful insights, and it's really important that our entire team is aware of this. So it's really kind of focusing on a lot of the intangibles, if you will, that our companies get the most value out of.
Totally. And there certainly is a line to be drawn, but it's that to draw the line between, the amount on your invoice to the amount in their CRM, there's a sales leader and a sales team kind of in between. And like, there's so many variables, and then there's the market fluctuations and this and that. So I hear what you're saying. So, and one, great points. And two, kind of not surprising that they were just jumping right to the demo and they knew a lot about our product. I imagine that's a pretty common area for companies to struggle.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've also enjoyed about win-loss is there are usually a couple of general themes, or we call them like stories, that when we're looking at our clients' data, we recognize. And so you kind of are able to recognize patterns and say, okay, I've seen this before with this company. Now I'm seeing it again. Now I'm able to really help my client based on what I've seen before. But even within those kind of general frameworks or storylines, there's a lot of really specific and kind of unique details that are really important for the client itself. Like we just talked about being customer centric. That's a general framework that a lot of times we'll see. The other one is, or another one is, looking at the relationship between price and value. And one of the more interesting analyses we like to do is, like I was just talking about, satisfaction ratings. Looking at satisfaction ratings for our clients' price point versus to their expected value that they're going to bring an organization. And, what can sometimes be really impactful is for a client to see, oh, you know what? Satisfaction with our price point between when we win and when we lose is usually actually pretty similar. But the satisfaction with expected value, there's a huge delta there. It's obviously really high for customers that selected you, but much lower for customers that didn't. And if the price point is the same, what's driving that delta? And that's where we try to unpack in a more detail for the client that we're working with. For the wins, like how are they seeing the value? What did they say in their own words was our client's value proposition or the best parts of their product offering versus in losses, what was different about that feedback? And so, there are a couple of, overall trends that we see that help us kind of focus on where to center with clients. But then from there, it's really getting into the nuance and the specificity of their own customers' feedback.
Got it. I would love to kind of the general patterns behaviors is really interesting to me. So customer centric is kind of one on the index of like, we talk about ourselves to we talk about our customers. The other general pattern is the kind of expected value or the satisfaction with the EV versus the satisfaction with the price. What are some other patterns that you've seen that you've noticed in these interviews?
It's called win-loss analysis for a reason. We want to be comparing feedback in wins to feedback and losses. And I can touch more on that too, because some companies only do loss feedback, which is really good. Like you're going to get the most feedback in terms of kind of constructive feedback for how to move forward better from losses, obviously, because there's a reason why you lost. But wins are super important too, for a number of different reasons. One of them is being able to compare and contrast, right? Like we want to be able to see what are the things you're doing well when you win versus where you're falling short in those losses. Where are those areas of inconsistency that, depending on who our client is, ironing out that inconsistency to make sure that your messaging, your sales approach, how your product is being perceived is uniform across different areas of your business. That's another one where we work a lot with our clients. So definitely that's another kind of framework that we'll pay attention to.
Cool. And then like some trends in like mistakes, like we go back to that first example, the customer was just talking about their product or your customer is just talking about their product. What other kind of trends do you see on the thing? Like when like what are the standard like 3 to 5 things where you're like, oh yeah, they're doing this again? Are there some other common ones?
Yeah, specific to sales, because I know that's probably where your audience is most interested. There's kind of the big three, if you will, of what we call a consultative approach. It's, did you really understand your prospect's needs? Were you able to be consultative, really align the capabilities of your solution to what those specific needs are? That's one. Two is differentiation. Are you able to effectively talk about how your solution is different and better than maybe other solutions, and something that we're seeing a lot more of in like deals that are ending in stall or no decision. So it's not just how you're different from other solutions in the marketplace, but how are you different and better than just someone keeping the status quo going, maybe using whatever they're doing in terms of a homegrown solution. And then the third is, we touched on it a little bit earlier, it's value articulation. How are you making sure that prospects recognize what you're going to bring to their company, whether that's quantitatively through like ROI, or maybe it's more of an emotional value. I think in terms of like the trends that we see that drive whether our clients are doing well or falling short from a sales perspective, it's, are they nailing the consultative approach? Are they differentiating well? Are they articulating their value well? Those are the big three, I think.
Interesting. I mean, that's it. Podcast over. Just focus on those three things
Yeah, we
and
just
you'll be
solved
fine.
sales right there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. I want to get into it now because those are
Mhm.
definitely three things where I'm like, okay, I could see when I'm thinking about our process, I'm like, okay, I know we're very
Mhm.
consultative. That was a hard word to say. Um, differentiation. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I feel probably okay. And then value
Mhm.
articulation. I've got a particular rep I'm working with, and I'm like, this is one of the areas where we've been focusing on how do you build the business case. I love the
Mhm.
language of expected value, maybe because I used to play poker,
Mhm.
not professionally or even amateurly, but just like,
Yeah.
I played in casinos and I didn't lose money, all of my money
Hey,
immediately.
that's a win right there.
I didn't consistently do that, but
Okay.
I'm net up a little bit.
Okay.
But I love the idea of the expected value of the
Mhm.
offering, of like what we're offering, and building the business case around that. And you could kind of bring in the idea of like a risk adjusted EV almost when you're talking to a
Mhm.
prospect.
Mhm.
I really like that. So how do we get into how do I get into doing this win-loss analysis? Obviously, you talk to the wins, you talk to the losses.
Mhm.
It's easier to talk to the wins because now they're your customers. How do you
Yep.
go about talking to the losses? Or tell me the story of both. But I'm
Mhm.
more curious about the
Yeah, for
losses because
sure.
those people are ghosting you
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. Well, yeah, a lot of the time. I think thinking about putting a win-loss program in place, I think, the first step, which before we get into like the tactical things, is just kind of taking a step back and being like, am I ready for the feedback that I'm going to receive? Feedback it's absolutely a gift, but some people are afraid of it. So, as long as you're ready to kind of leave your ego at the door and receive not just praise, but like the constructive criticism about where you fell short, recognize that criticism is going to make you better, then you're ready. And I think that is step one. And whether you're doing win loss like on yourself or maybe you're founder of a company, you have to kind of make sure that culturally your team is ready for the feedback. And it can be a really great tool for building a culture of accountability and continuous improvement, but there needs to be that buy-in up front. And then from there, before even doing the interviews, there's what we kind of think about as like a design phase. So think about things like really simply like who's going to be doing the interviews. And that varies depending on organization, right? If you're a founder and you're still kind of like doing all the sales yourself, some of the things you need to think about are, should I be doing these interviews myself? Or should I be bringing in someone who's a little bit more objective in a third party? Um, Same thing for like, if you have a small sales team, who should be doing those interviews? There are pluses and minuses to kind of like different approaches companies can take, but you want to know who's going to be doing them. You want to design interview guides in a way that is going to be a nice marriage of information that you're focused on. What are the two or three or four or five things that the questions you want most answered, but also leave room for what was important for the prospect themselves, right? Like getting back to being customer centric. If you just focus the whole thing on, well, what did I do and all this stuff, you might miss something like, oh, the prospect was focused on something that you didn't even touch on. So you want to give some thought to interview guide design, and then you want to think about who you're actually going to be talking to. And in order to get them to commit, there are a couple of things that I would recommend there. I mean, the first is build it into your sales process. We like to say that win loss is, or the last step of a sales process isn't just marking it as closed, whether that's won or lost. It's actually following up and doing a post decision debrief. But in order to get there, as you're having conversations with prospects, pre-wire it. Say, hey, I'm really looking forward to coming in and presenting, tomorrow or next week. Just by the way, hey, win, lose, or draw, I'm committed to collecting your feedback. It's going to help me improve. And then, when decision actually comes, The prospect knows that you're going to be reaching out for feedback, and they kind of feel like they're in a position, they feel a little bit indebted to you. Hopefully you built a strong enough relationship, invested a lot in the sales pitch so that they feel like your effort is worth their time to provide feedback. So those are all things you can kind of like set up the yourself to have a successful research program. But let me stop there. I'm, happy to go deeper into any of those areas if you want.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a one. I'm a big fan of like automatic habits where you do it on
Mhm.
every deal. And I just
Mhm.
had one of those like, we could definitely do this moments where
Mhm.
at the end of our sales process, we go really strong on the discovery side.
Mhm.
And I coach our AEs on the idea that customers should be willing to pay for a sales process. Like that's how good it needs to be.
Mhm.
And I know it's kind of a silly thing to say. Like you're not going to be like, hey, give me $1,000 to kind of join it. Even
Yeah.
though I did say that I'll do that to certain people that are just like, hey, I want to get 10 minutes of your time. I'm like, I know you're just looking for free consulting. Like, and I get a lot of founders reaching out, and I'm happy
Yeah.
to chat with founders. It's specifically the like consultants that have, or not consultants, the like marketplaces that are trying to pick my brain.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's another piece. But
Another time.
the thing that was connecting to me was at the end of our sales process, we're we generally have a pretty good relationship with the prospect, and like
Mhm.
they tend to be very open. We're also dealing with salespeople. Salespeople are
Mhm.
the best people to sell to because they've been selling themselves, and so they know kind of what the expectations are. But the aha
Mhm.
moment for me is like, we can just book this as a next step. Hey, a month
Mhm.
out, you mind if we do like a
Yeah.
win-loss chat and just kind of talk about
Yeah.
the direction you went and give me some, or like, feedback.
For sure. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. The actually, like, the last time you want to be doing a win-loss kind of debrief session. I mean, it's better than not doing one at all, but it's you get that email, hey, sorry, we're not moving ahead with you at this time. You don't want to just call them up right there. It's almost like a breakup, if you will. Like you kind of want the dust to settle,
Mhm.
let the wounds heal, kind of come at it next week, next month with a more objective point of view. And I think that really helps with not making a debate. Again, like you don't want to get on the phone and just start like going back and forth with the customer.
Mhm.
You're there to collect their feedback. You're there to listen. And that's hard to do when the loss is so fresh because you
Mhm.
committed so much of your time, your effort, your kind of emotional health to pitching a deal, and losses sting. Give it some time. Don't give it too much time. Like you don't want their memories to fade and them to move on to other things. But
Mhm.
say, hey, can I follow up with you next week? Get 20, 30 minutes of your time, and would love to just get your honest feedback.
Taking a note to myself. So you recommend a week later, 2 weeks later?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on the business a little bit, but yeah, usually within a month is like the sweet spot. We say we can go back as much as like a quarter, but it kind of depends
Mhm.
on the deal size. If it was a huge deal where there was a lot involved, um, people will remember a little bit more. But yeah, people are busy. They're moving on to the next thing. You want to catch them where there's a little bit of time, but not where too much time has passed in between.
Fair enough. I think for us, a month out is perfect because then you're kind of
Yeah.
in the middle of our competitors onboarding. You're like, hey, so,
Exactly. Yeah, you want to
it's like,
know.
is it really going all right?
It's a we definitely in losses will ask that all the time. Hey, how's your onboarding going with your selected vendor? And
Mhm.
sometimes it's a mess. Would you be open to re-engaging with our client down the line? Is sometimes a question you can ask.
Interesting. Do you offer compensation for these? Like you say, hey, I'll buy you a beer or a bottle or something, Amazon gift card, Kindle.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to rely on is that concept of like professional courtesy, right? Like
Mhm.
we're talking about it here. There was a lot invested from the sales side, and usually buyers recognize that. And as long as you've been communicating and pre-wiring throughout that you're going to be following up for feedback, people recognize that, yeah, I can carve out, half an hour of time to give feedback, or even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes. Um, incentives, we've seen them used to kind of like mix success. So what we try to do is not rely on them. We try to just rely on people's professional courtesy.
Cool. All right. That's neat. And I think you could kind of see that, at least I'm thinking in our sales process, we could kind of see that near the end. Like we're very open about, anyway, um, I'm like I'm stealing your time. Like this is a coaching call for Collin right now.
There you
I'm
go.
going to try this out. Okay. So we started with it's design, research, action. In the design phase, you're working on the interview guide. You basically map out the interview guide, which is the questions that you want answered and the people you're going to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Who you're going to talk to, what you're going to talk to them about, right? And I love the word interview guide because it is meant to be a guide. You don't want to have just a list of questions that you're going down one after the other.
Checklist,
Right?
checklist, checklist. That's
Exactly.
awful.
It's going to be robotic. It's a quick way to get whoever's providing you the feedback to just shut down and recognize it feels like a race to just get to the end of the checklist. And so they're going to help you get there. They're just going to give you one sentence responses and keep moving. You want questions so that, it's a focused conversation. And also, as you're receiving the feedback, sometimes it can be tough to hear. It can help you just center of where you want to go next. But you don't want that scripted feeling, right? Leave it open for discussion, leave room for probes, right? Like as you're having the conversation, don't just take the first thing that comes out of their mouth at face value. Invite them to open up and say more. Can you tell me more about that? Ask for competitive examples, things like that. And even just using silence, right? Like say, hey, I'm taking notes, keep talking. And people will fill that space because people hate silence. So as you're doing the interviews, kind of use those little tips to get people to really open up as much as possible.
No, I want to ask you about questions, but
Yeah.
I don't want to spend 8 hours talking about questions because I'm
Yeah.
sure there's
Uh,
a bit of a method to the madness.
uh,
Is it fair to say that they're centered around the three kind of general patterns, behaviors that you found that we talked about above, the customer centric product or the consultative approach, the differentiation and value articulation?
I actually think about guides like more of following the buyer journey, if you will. You want to understand what was bringing them to market, kind of how they set up their evaluation, how they learned about you, what business problems they were trying to solve. I mean, hopefully that's information you uncovered during your discovery. But sometimes kind of like taking a step back and just getting the lay of the land really helps you understand your buyer more. You want to understand what they thought about you. So, open-ended questions. Hey, what did you think we did well? Where could we have improved? And just kind of leave those top of mind, see what comes up from the respondent's perspective, but then also, drill down, what did you think about our sales process? What did you think about our product? Different features, the user interface, how we partnered with you from like a services perspective, how was our pricing compared to the competition? Kind of like center on some of those main areas of feedback. And then you want to get to, okay, why did you make the decision you did? Who did you choose? If it was a loss, why did you choose them? If it was a no decision, maybe like, what changed? You came into this process looking to maybe implement a vendor. What shifted internally? And is there anything that you'd recommend me to do moving forward to like better partner with your organization? Things like that. You kind of want to just when I'm creating interview guides for our clients, I try to follow the buyer journey and really get like that holistic perspective of their evaluation.
Cool. I feel like there's one more thing. I'm just writing down a bunch of notes. So it's like, how do you, following the buyer journey,
Yeah, you want me
what
to
are the
fill the
key
space
factors?
here with some more content?
Yeah. Well, it was basically like, how do you see, where was I? Yeah. How do you see the
Mhm.
us
Yeah,
position against our competitors? What direction did you
that's
go? What was the key factor in that
yeah,
decision?
exactly. Yeah, and I think those competitive comparisons are really important. If you, especially if you know it was competitive, maybe you're going up against someone who you compete against all the time. Just ask the prospect to rate you and rate the competitor for the things that you're really focused on. At the top of our discussion, I was talking about gathering ratings for like sales process, like your product knowledge or your product demo. but also, parts of your product. Like, hey, we've got this feature. What would you rate your satisfaction for that feature? Did our competitor have the same feature? What would you rate their satisfaction? If the ratings are different, you want to understand, oh, okay, what's driving that delta? Maybe they're the same. Okay, we're being rated the same. Maybe my differentiation isn't resonating as much as I think it is. So, getting those head-to-head competitive ratings are really insightful.
Hmm. That's really great. So you kind of follow the buyer journey, what brought them to
Mhm.
market, how they've heard about you, what they thought about you, your process, your company in relation to the competitors, and then you
Mhm.
want to get into their decision, what direction they went, what were the key factors in that decision,
Mhm.
and like kind of understanding where the delta was between, you versus your competitor. I'm kind of think of like a radar graph of like they were strong on this side and we were strong on
Yeah.
this side, and this was
Mhm.
the most important piece to us, and that
Yeah.
kind of helps understand like this was their perception, was it accurate, and so like was it really a product loss where the competitor's product was a better fit, or was it a sales loss where the competitor's sales process was better?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
kind of how you think,
exactly.
right way to think about it?
Yeah, bingo. Yep.
Cool. I'm starting a win-loss analysis company next
There
week.
you go. I'm giving you all the keys to the castle right here.
No, I mean, this is the best part of the podcast. Like, I get to learn how to do a thing, and I'm annoyingly curious anyway. And I'm going to ask
Mhm.
this, even if we just met in a bar, I'd be asking these
Mhm.
same questions. So now we just record it and people get to listen and kind of benefit from me annoying people with, like, oh, tell me more, tell me more, tell me
Yeah.
more.
Well, like I said, it's why I like win loss so much is that like it's not rocket science. We're asking buyers about what they thought about a company and why they made the decision they did. But there's so much you can unpack from the responses that the buyers are giving you, and I just find it fascinating. But yeah, it's not like there's some secret algorithm to doing it. You just have to do it well. You got to commit to it, and kind of bring the yeah, there is some level of expertise and little tips you can do to do it better, but you really just kind of have to commit to it and just act on the feedback as it comes in.
Totally. Like anything, it's one of those things. It's easy to talk about. It's very hard
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
do. It's very easy to do once. It's very, very
Right.
hard to do consistently every
Yeah.
deal.
I guess that's true. Yeah. I mean, I'm coming at it after doing it for 10 years. So what may seem easy to me, isn't always that easy to do for the first time. But that's with everything. You just got to commit to the right habits. And win loss is a great habit to get into.
I love that. So if I think about the design phase, it's kind of two
Mhm.
different pieces. It's first picking, I mean, maybe three phases. It's trying to understand ahead of time, these are the questions that we want to answer.
Mhm.
Then these are the folks that we're going to reach out to. And
Mhm.
then this is what we're going to do when we get them on a call. Is that
Mhm.
the right way to think about it?
Yeah.
Cool. And then from a win perspective, they're your customers. So it's much easier to start that conversation and you run the
Mhm.
same questions through them. And then the loss is takes a little bit more.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on, just before we move to the research step, any thoughts on like percentage of people that you reach out to? Like, do 100% of people say yes? Do 4% of people say yes to these? Like, what's a good baseline to shoot for?
Yeah, it's I mean, in terms of who you're shooting for, I guess there are definitely situations that you can DQ because it wouldn't be worth collecting the feedback for whatever reason. But the vast majority of situations, you almost want to just take the decision off the table. It's yes, I'm going to be following up for feedback. Don't even think about it, commit to doing it. In terms of like conversion of okay, I'm reaching out for feedback. Am I going to get it?
Mhm.
Our experience is that we have and we're not even the client that we're an independent third party.
Mhm.
We usually get around like 50 to 60% of people to actually agree to the interview,
Wow.
which there's a lot of like elbow grease and following up there to make sure that we stay on people to kind of encourage them to provide the feedback.
Mhm.
But to the point about sales teams invest a lot, build strong relationships. If you're doing that well, buyers will agree to give you feedback. Like I think people kind of understand that. If you're just reaching out and there was no relationship, you're going to expect a lower response rate. Some of the clients who we work with, where it's kind of one demo, more transactional sale, they're not close to that 50 to 60%. They're maybe closer to like, maybe 25%, 30. But I have some clients who what they're selling is kind of 12-month sales cycles, heavy buying committees, large dollar value. I've seen response rates like 90% before. So it really comes down to how strong of a relationship you built with somebody. Because then when you ask them for a favor, are they going to do it or not?
And are they going to believe that you're a good actor that's doing this just for your own professional development versus this is a sneaky follow-up to try and like grind me? And there's
exactly.
a couple of companies.
When you're reaching out, it's all about feedback. Make that really clear. I'm reaching out for feedback, and I welcome your constructive feedback. It's the only way that's going to make me better. And make that clear when you're asking for feedback. Make that clear when you're getting on the call. Just kind of set the stage. Hey, I'm here to listen. I've got some questions, but I really want to hear your advice for how I can be better the next time.
Right on. And largely the last piece is just on the execution side of this, on the when I think about the design phase. Say it's my sales team. It's myself. I'm the founder. I run the sales team. We got a couple of people on the team.
Yep.
Is it me reaching out to them? Is it them reaching out to them and booking the calls?
So those are the things to think about. I mean, you kind of have to weigh, like I mentioned, like who's doing the interview is really important, right? So a salesperson can reach out themselves and do the interview, and that's great. But they're just not in an objective position to receive the feedback. Obviously very biased, and the respondents kind of recognize that too. They're agreeing to do the interview because of the relationship you built, but because of that relationship, they don't want to tell you that you messed up the demo and that someone did it better. So I would definitely recommend kind of getting one step removed. Maybe that is someone within your organization, like you're doing interviews on behalf of your team, something like that, or maybe you can find like someone who can help from like a third party perspective that isn't a member of your company, your team, that can really bring that
maybe someone
unbiased
with win-loss experience and that
hasn't been doing it for 10 years. Be helpful too. Because it's
I wonder if you know anybody. Maybe we could talk about that at the end.
Yeah, we could talk. It's the objectivity that's really important. I mean, it's the expertise as well, right? Like hopefully what you're hearing as I'm talking is that there are little kind of tips and best practices you can employ to get the best feedback possible. And if you're an experienced market researcher, you're going to be a little bit better at doing those interviews than maybe you're a founder, very product driven, or maybe you've spent your career in sales, all about sales, but maybe not doing these market research interviews. But the flip side is that, no one's going to know your product better than you. So what you want to do is kind of make sure that the information you get back is going to be relevant and informative enough. And if you feel like someone who's removed from your company can do it in a knowledgeable way, then absolutely, I think getting someone who's unbiased and a third party is the best way to go. But if you kind of doubt that, because maybe what you're offering is really unique or esoteric, then get someone who knows what you're talking about, but maybe not the salesperson themselves.
Cool. So getting into the research step, now we're on the live conversation. We've gone through all the effort to design the thing. We've got this person on the call. Obviously we just run through the book, active listening, all the good sales stuff, market research stuff.
Yeah.
How does the research phase go? Is it just the calls? Is it the analysis?
So
talk to me about
you
this phase.
You do the interview, and what we do is we transcribe the interview because we're delivering it back to our clients. I would definitely recommend, like, if you're doing it yourself, maybe you record the interview, but at the minimum, like, you're taking a lot of notes.
Do you guys do that by hand, or do you use like a Fathom or a
kind of tool? I mean, those tools are getting pretty good now. So like you can definitely use that. some people use, like, I'm old fashioned. I've got my pen and notebook in front of me right now.
No way, you psychopath.
I
That's
know.
crazy.
I'm like the last bastion of like millennials who's still kind of like some things old fashioned. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that, the call recording stuff, the transcription, that's getting really impressive now. So you can rely on that for the most part. A lot of our interviewers will use that. Um, and yeah, you want to kind of like sit down and go through what the notes are. So on an individual basis, like for instance, if you did an interview on a member of your team, what I would recommend is, hey, send that recording, send that transcription to the member of your team, give them a chance to review, and then sit down and talk it through, like use it for coaching. And just like you're being very careful of positioning the interview with the prospect as, I'm not here to, debate you, or I'm just here to collect your feedback. When you're sitting down for the coaching opportunity, it's, I'm not here to rub your nose in some of this critical feedback. I don't want to say, hey, the prospect said you messed up the demo. Like, what happened? You want to say, hey, like, how do you think the demo went? How's that compared to what the prospect said? What are some things you can do moving forward to be a little bit better? Like, use it as a productive coaching tool. That's really important on like an individual basis. And sometimes there's going to be, well, there is going to be a lot of good sales feedback, but if there's feedback about your product, bring in, your head of product, talk about, hey, we're receiving this feedback. Why do you think this is going on? Is there something we can do about this? Get those different perspectives. Because just like, that meme of the dress, is it yellow, is it blue? Like, there are always two sides or multiple sides to every story. What you want to do is combine what the prospect said and what your seller said, and see where there's common ground, see where there are differences, and unpack why those differences exist. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's, hey, they're seeing things differently than how we want them to see them. How can we get everyone seeing the same thing? That's on, again, the individual basis, but then definitely as you're doing more interviews, you're going to get to a point where you want to look across those interviews, and you want to, it's not, like I was saying earlier, it's not rocket science. It's, hey, like, what percentage of our clients are saying they're making their decision based on product feature X, or what percentage of our, lost interviews are they saying our sales presentation didn't meet their needs? Kind of looking at these percentages, looking at if you're capturing scores, like what your average score is compared to the competition. There's some pretty simple but extremely illuminating analysis you can do. And then, as you're doing more, you start to understand the patterns and the trends, and can look through those different frameworks that I was talking about earlier to better understand overall storylines that are coming through.
Really interesting. And so I want to double click on like tracking the metrics and analyzing. I've done customer development interviews, and I just put them all into a big sheet, line by line. And it's like, I have to have an ultra wide monitor to see it all, and I still can't get it all because there's so many variables. Is that roughly what you all are doing with this? Kind of the same thing? You just put the feedback into a big spreadsheet and then analyze it from there?
I mentioned been doing this for 10 years. Like when I started my role as an analyst, at that point we were manually data entering all the interviews into a spreadsheet, and then, going through line by line, hey, this person mentioned this person mentioned that, kind of tagging them. We still do that to a large degree, but we're also leveraging like technology tools that help us tag things in real time and then get to aggregate percentages a lot quicker. So spreadsheets are super powerful for doing that. You want to just get a sense of how many people of all the people that we talk to are talking about the areas that you're interested in.
Interesting. I got a sidebar I'll bring up after the interview, or after we wrap this. A friend of mine's working on something in the kind of call recording space centered around jobs to be done, and he's basically helping people answer questions about a call recording in a very specific way. But I wanted to bring it up, but I don't think we want to spend 10 minutes on it, so we could chat afterwards. And if anybody's listening, that sounds interesting, hit me up and I can make an intro for you. All right, so we've got the live conversations. We run them, we analyze them, put them in a big database. It sounds like you've got some sort of automated, you take the call recording, you take the transcript, you ask it, hey, GPT, tell me if they did this, tell me if they did that, tell me if they did that. You kind of rerun on. This is how I'm thinking I would do it in a prompt. It's just, I actually have a prompt that will go, and we have like a call scoring framework,
Nice.
and it does like a lightweight version of this. And you just give it past the call transcript into GPT and say, hey, did you open well? Do you think rapport was built well? Did you end with next steps? Like, the basic kind of things. So
Yeah.
it sounds like that's the kind of the high level. You put it all into a spreadsheet, and then you've got an analyst that can go through and go over the trends and the patterns.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably like the biggest shift that we're seeing right now with doing this, whether it's like AI or technology helping with the call recording, the call transcription, the call like tagging and analysis. All that stuff is just, even like compared to like using ChatGPT a couple of months ago to where it is now, like it's getting so much more advanced. And it really helps like with all of those kind of like administrative or analytical type things. But where I think there's still like where AI or technology isn't going to be able to replace is like that human to human interaction, right? Like, like reflecting back on feedback is a gift. It's also like fundamentally human. I think having face-to-face conversations with someone about, hey, what'd you think about our product or service or not, and why'd you buy? People are going to open up a lot more to a person than they would, just kind of like a web survey or an AI driven thing. And same thing with the analysis, right? Like, say you're kind of looking through all the interviews on your team, and you mentioned or you notice that there's a certain attribute, sales skill that comes up a lot as a weakness, or maybe a specific person on your team is struggling with a certain element. I think the best way to get them to act on that is through, sit down, a coaching session where you're face to face. Don't just kind of send them into a dashboard to interpret the results for themselves.
I think the biggest advantage that humans have over an AI, because I think technically you could, if you could get your prospects to go through these things, I think technically you could probably build a GPT bot that would go through and answer and ask all these questions and do it fairly efficiently from your time perspective. I think the thing that it can't replicate is the shared experiences and the empathy.
Exactly.
I imagine we'll get to the empathy side with a GPT bot or AI bots eventually. I don't know how believable or how real it will be without those shared experiences, right? Like that's where you can really resonate with somebody, like, the minute facial expressions, the, telling a story of like, oh yeah, I've been there too. And, Bob did this. Like, I don't know if we'll ever get there. It'd be hard to get there from an AI because the AI doesn't have those experiences, I think. Sorry, future AI, if you're listening to this, I mean, like, fuck you, man.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's I think obviously it's going to get better, but the tone of voice, the pause before you say something where someone can tell that you're really kind of wrestling with how you're saying it or being diplomatic with what you're saying. I think you want to use the AI and the technology to almost like prop up to make your human to human interactions as effective as possible. And then you can focus on like things like the empathetic listening or like the active listening or storytelling that you're doing as you're trying to coach your team on what you're seeing in the data. That's where you can focus.
Love it. So that's the research component. We're running the interviews. We're getting them transcribed. We are taking the notes. I think the thing I'm thinking about, like, what is the scope of these? Like, are you doing 4? Are you doing 400? Somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to depend on your business. If you had 5 deals and you get 4 interviews done, those are going to be pretty telling, right? But if you've got hundreds of deals, you probably want to do more than that. But you don't need to
say you're closing. Say you got a client, they're closing 10 deals a month. What would your advice to them be? Like, should you do 10? Will you learn enough in 10? Would it be 20? Would it be 100?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely going to start to identify some pretty meaningful trends once you start getting into like the double digits. Usually, like, I feel really strong. Usually, like 20 to 30 data points is when I really notice things that are that are strong and hold up to like the scrutiny of the stakeholders that I'm presenting the results to. And I would say, yeah, 10 deals a month, you're not going to be getting 100% of them like we talked about. Like if you're fortunate enough to get half of those to complete interviews and you're doing, 50, 60 interviews a year, you're going to get so much insight from that. It's going to be awesome. Don't like beat yourself up though if you only get 20 or 30 data points. Like that's still obviously better than zero. Could you do 100 interviews if you did all of them, or 120? Yeah, you could. I think from when you start to get to like data sets that large and that representative, the aggregate trends don't change all that much. What happens is each interview though is that really important coaching tool that you can understand each specific situation, like what happened, and sit down with the reps to talk about what the findings were.
That is a great segue to like, how do we act on some of this? Because it's one thing to, design the study, or to design the research. It's another thing to do the research. But if you're not going to put it into practice, it's probably not worth doing. So what are some best practices for putting this into practice?
I think the biggest thing to do, whether you're just going through maybe you're sitting down and watching the call recording or listening to it, or you're sharing your written notes, you want to share it, right? Like you don't just want to look at things through your own point of view. Bring in, like I mentioned, like someone from product, someone from marketing, certainly the salesperson who was involved in the deal, and maybe sales leader. Get kind of multiple people involved in reading and interpreting the feedback, and everyone's going to bring their own different perspective on what was going on. And the best way to get to kind of like the ultimate truth or way to move forward productively is by combining all those different perspectives. So that can be kind of like a meeting where you sit down and go through just qualitative, watching the recording, like I said, or maybe it is a roll up of the results and you're sitting down and going through the trends like, hey, 10% of our customers are mentioning this, or 90% are mentioning that, and talking about what the implication is. I think the biggest thing is share the results, get people involved from within your organization. And that's where we get into like some of the intangible benefits of win-loss. Is it really drives, like we call it cross-functional alignment across your business, because it's you're bringing everyone together, they're discussing what the feedback is, and you kind of eventually get to a point where people are seeing it and understand it the same way. And that's really powerful for organizations, is to get people, to use a kind of overused phrase like singing from the same hymnal. That's something that I think a lot of business leaders struggle with, is how do we get people aligned around where we're trying to get to. And one of the best ways to do that is by saying, hey, here's where the market thinks we are. Let's make sure we're all aligned on where we're trying to get to and how to get there.
That's really interesting. And so if we think about I'm just trying to encapsulate it in my head. If I'm thinking about the whole project, we're going to spend some time on the design phase. We're going to actually go out and do 20 to 50 conversations, and 20 to 50 of these interviews. We'll transcribe them. It's mostly going to be one person who's doing the analysis, but then they're going to be sharing the individual calls with maybe the salespeople that were involved. Then there's probably a product person and an executive level kind of sponsor that's getting involved. Possibly a final report on like X or Y. What are the other critical steps? If somebody's listening and they want to go away and tomorrow or next week replicate this internally, what are we missing? What don't they know that they're going to need to if they wanted to do this internally?
I mean, you've got the basic framework right there. The one thing I would say is that you don't need to wait until you do interview all of them together, right? Like there's a lot of learning that happens throughout the process. Like one of the things we do Anova, we do win-loss on ourselves, and every 5 interviews we do on ourselves, we'll sit down as a team and go through those 5 and talk about what the findings are. 5 interviews isn't super statistically significant. We'll do our own kind of aggregate roll-up at the end of the year, but we're getting, on a monthly basis, kind of like where are buyers' heads at? Where's our performance at? How can we move forward in a better way? So don't just wait until you get a critical mass of interviews, like 30 data points. Like, we do 4 or 5, sit down and talk about them. Do the next 4 or 5, sit down and talk about them. We recommend our clients also, like, you can assign, identify action items and then assign an action owner. Say, hey, we need to improve our messaging around this feature set. Okay, bring in someone from product marketing and assign them with kind of cleaning up that messaging, whatever that looks like. And then they can report back and say, yes, here's what I did to act on that feedback. So make sure that, it's not just kind of like sit and wait. You're being active and engaged with the feedback throughout the process.
I love that. You must be, I mean, you're in front of this all the time with customers, and I love that you're doing it on yourself. This isn't one of those shoemakers, kids kind of scenarios. I'm curious, what trends are you seeing these days in terms of win-loss analysis, and maybe kind of how that differs from the last couple of years?
I think the biggest thing that we're hearing a lot, we're seeing with our own deal flow, honestly, is this concept of no decisions in stalls. And I'm not sure if like that's something you're seeing or what you're hearing from your clients as well. They're probably, if it's as uniform across the market as we understand it to be, like, they're probably saying, hey, how do we get buyers to actually make a decision? That's like probably the biggest thing that we've seen definitely over the last 2 years. And, I think we have the anecdotal evidence of it. There's a lot of kind of research out there too. Like, I was seeing some other stats, like purchase volume overall in the B2B setting is down like 23% compared to like 2022. So there are only 75% of the deals that there were a couple of years ago. 90% of buyers expect their process to be delayed or stall. It's crazy that 9 out of 10 people who are buying something are like, oh yeah, this is going to take longer than what we're saying to the timeline we're giving to sellers. And there are a lot of reasons for that that I can get into if you want. But one of the things that we're trying to do is help our clients understand why that's going on. But also, how can we tailor our research to give them the feedback that they can use to encourage their buyers to make a decision, right? It's not, who did you choose and why? Oh, we haven't made a decision. Oh, okay. Like, end of conversation. It's, I think I was talking about this earlier, but did your priorities change? Did you decide to invest in something else? When would be a good time to follow up? If there was was there anything our client could have done to make you make a decision right now? There's a different stream of questions that I think are really becoming important.
Yeah. To your earlier question, yes, we've seen deals take longer to get through, especially compared to, 2-3 years ago. I mean, the pandemic was a weird time where everything slowed down and then it accelerated. It was shot out of a cannon. And then I think last year it kind of felt like, if you've ever driven like on a racetrack, you go to Vegas, you like rent the Ferrari or something like that, and you drive around for 3 laps.
Yeah.
And then you step out and you get into like the bus and it feels like you're going 4 miles an hour, even though you're doing 30. I mean, anytime you get off the highway, right? You go on a long road trip, you get off the highway, now you're in like a 30 zone, and you're like, geez, this feels slow. Like, that's kind of I think the feeling that most sales teams have probably had. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just found buyers reverting back from this like period of exuberance and everybody had to grow at all costs to people are back to making real decisions. And that's probably a good thing for our spending. We're making better, smarter, more informed decisions. I think it also leads to and maybe I just have the like, we sell sales consulting kind of angle to the way I think about it, but it makes having a great account exec team, a great closing team even better, because you have to go and do this. You have to be great at your discovery. You have to be finding a real pain. You have to be able to like really dig and build that business case, and to know, to be able to come together with your prospect and be like, hey, here's the expected value of this decision, the risk adjusted. This is why we think it's a good decision. And it's not just like the AE making that, this is something they work on with the prospect together. So I think it makes that ability for AEs even more important. It makes what you do even more important, because the only way you can really improve your sales process, and maybe not the only way, but one of the best ways to, is win-loss analysis. And so I'd love to wrap it just, do you know anybody that does win-loss analysis?
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if people are listening to this and they like what they're hearing, they want to learn more. Yeah, the company I work for is Anova Consulting Group. I'm in my 10th year with the company. Anova's, we're celebrating our 20th year this year. So, I have a lot of experience and expertise doing this kind of work. We're the market leader for win-loss, and it's win-loss on new business decisions, but it's also a voice of the customer feedback as a whole, right? Like, a lot of companies have, product-led growth models where it's that land and expand, where you want to be talking to existing clients about, hey, what's going on? How are you using our products? What could we get? How could we get you to, use our product more, or maybe why you're spending less? If churn is happening, we do churn a lot. So really, what we're a feedback company. We help our clients understand the feedback from their buyers. And if that's something that folks are interested in, go to our website, anovaconsulting.com. My email is pretty easy. It's Zach, ZACH, at anovaconsulting.com. And would love to, continue the conversation.
Love it. I'm going to throw a link to Anova Consulting in the show notes here. I'll fire a link to your LinkedIn so people are looking to reach out.
Awesome.
We've got a couple of quick links for you there. Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for helping me start my win-loss analysis company next week. If anybody's interested. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's good. Good. Go ahead.
I am genuinely thinking like I'm going to do this on our sales team, and I think it's definitely something that everybody should be thinking about, especially with where buyers are at. So thank you for sharing all your secrets.
Happy to. And yeah, you should. Would love to maybe come back another time and just after you've done some interviews, talk about what you learned.
Totally, I would love that. Right on. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you all next week.